have long contended that national polling in a presidential race virtually meaningless. It's not how our system is run relative to how the election works and electoral college. It doesn't really matter what the nation as a whole feels, because that's not how we elect our presidents. But the closer we get to an election, and even statewide polls really don't matter all that much until we get to the stage we are. We are fewer than 50 days away from the election, I believe. And it is now time to give a little bit more stock to what polling says. And the states that you really need to focus on are those battleground states, the Wisconsins, the Michigans, the Pennsylvanias, the North Carolinas, the Georgias, the Arizonas, the Nevadas. Those are the states that are going to win or lose this election for us, for America. They're going to decide for America whether or not a democracy continues, whether or not we are a country of Donald Trump, an insurrection, and an attempt to overthrow the United States government and reinserting Donald Trump even though we lost. Are we going to be that country, or are we going to be a country that is self-governed and decent and forward-looking and empathetic? Who do we want to be? What are our values? Anyway, so, I mean, obviously that's what's at stake. I'm going to play this clip from Harry Enten, who is like he comes out of 538, used to work for Nate Silver. Now he's doing pretty good work over at CNN and analyzing the polls. And he has nothing but good news relative to 3 or 4 different polling outfits for Kamala Harris, and ultimately, by extension, for America. And it's looking good. Now, I always hesitate to share polling data for this reason, and that is a lot of people will like, oh, she's got this in the bag. I don't need to go vote. And that is not the case. This race is tight, and in order to secure an overwhelming victory, you got to get to the polls. You got to get your friends, your neighbors, your acquaintances, your coworkers, people you sit at the bus stop next to vote, to get out there and exercise their right to vote, taking advantage of the franchise. So here's the polling data. It should buoy your spirits, but it also should motivate you to even increase these numbers from where they are now.
Right, so this is in the Keystone State in Pennsylvania. All these polls were released in the last 24 hours. And we see a lot more blue than red on your screen. So Quinnipiac yesterday, +5 in Pennsylvania for Kamala Harris. The New York Times this morning just out a 4-point lead for Kamala Harris. Franklin and Marshall in Pennsylvania, a 3-point margin, a little bit closer. And Marist came out at midnight, or 12:01, came out with a tie. I will also note the Washington Post had a 1-point advantage for Kamala Harris. So the bottom line is there is a range of results in the Keystone State. Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania. But it leans in the Harris direction. Not one of these results, even within the margin of error, has Trump ahead.
All right, before we get to the leans with 3 L's, let's talk about some of these other battleground states.
Yeah, let's talk about Michigan and Wisconsin. All right, so Marist College, Quinnipiac University, all coming out again within the last 24 hours. Well, this is not such a hard slide to digest, because the fact is they both found the same thing in both of the states. Marist and Quinnipiac in the state of Michigan finding Kamala Harris up by 1, and then in Wisconsin, well within the margin of error, but a 1-point advantage in Wisconsin. So the bottom line is, at least in these 2 important states, these 2 pollsters find the same thing.
Harry, what do you like to do when we get a whole lot of polling at once? What's the best way to understand it?
What's the best way to understand it? Well, I could throw a bunch of numbers at you like I just did, or we could average it all together. And all right, so this is Harris versus Trump in those Great Lake battleground states. We average it all together. This is all the September polling, not just the ones that I showed you. And what do we see? In Michigan, a 4-point advantage for Kamala Harris. In Pennsylvania, a 2-point advantage. Wisconsin, a 2-point advantage. Again, pretty gosh darn close, but leaning in her direction. And John, you know me. What does this all mean for the electoral map? Well, in the race to 270 electoral votes, keep in mind, Kamala Harris can win with just these northern battleground states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. So if we lean all of those blue here, and even if we give Donald Trump North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, Kamala Harris gets to exactly 270 electoral votes. And based upon the polling averages at this particular point, though it is close in those Great Lake battleground states, they do at this time lean a little bit more towards Harris's direction than Donald Trump's direction.
To reiterate, the polling right now, the trend line show this story where she's doing maybe a little better than she was with a clear path to 270.
She has an absolutely clear path to 270. I would argue at this particular hour, this was the best polling for Kamala Harris, arguably of the entire campaign, because in the states that she needs to win, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, the average of the polls do, in fact, show her ahead. And she doesn't need to win any of those southern battleground states if she wins those northern battleground states to get to exactly 270 electoral votes.
All right. Explain that very well, Harry.
Thank you.
Thank you for getting up a little earlier than
A little
usual.
bit earlier.
Appreciate it. All right.
All good news. That's where it stands right now. Now, things could change. We are not in October yet. There absolutely will be dirty tricks and lies and fabrications that come from the Trump camp, indicting or attempting to indict Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. That's just that's the part of the game. That's a part of politics, especially from a Trump team. I'm hoping that there are some October surprises in store. It's really tough with a guy like Donald Trump who could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and have nobody give a shit about it. So it's going to be difficult. I still contend that this election is going to be a larger margin of victory for Kamala Harris than Joe Biden did in 2020. I think that it's possible, I don't know about probable, but possible that we could win a state like Florida or even a Texas. And if that were to be the case, we don't need all this hand-wringing around North Carolina and Georgia and the Rust Belt states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. We don't necessarily need that. It's great because it will secure the victory that's going to be screamed and whined about when ultimately it happens from Donald Trump. There's going to be lawsuits, there's going to be roadblocks, there's going to be obstacles put in place because they want to be in office whether they win democratically or not. Anyway, some good news though. That's always good news. What do you think? I invite you to this conversation. You can comment below, which helps trigger the algorithm to share this content with new people. That would be great. You can also leave me a voicemail, 714-576-4054. And of course, as always, you can email me daily@dollemore.com. If I bring you value on a video by video basis and you want to help support and produce this work, click the join button below for $2 a month. You can do just that. Become a channel member and help me make these videos. You can also go over to patreon.com/IDoubtIt podcast. That's a great way. Also, same deal, $2, just a different giving mechanism, patreon.com/IDoubtIt podcast. Follow me on social media if you like misery. I'm at Dollemore. I'd love to see you there. And I'll see you next time. Until then, be genuine. Take care of one another.